For thousands of years, the Zirath Dominion had ruled the stars with absolute confidence. To many species, the Dominion was not just a government or a military power, it was more like a natural disaster. When their ships arrived in the sky, people did not think about fighting back. They only thought about how to survive long enough to surrender. The Dominion had grown so large and powerful that most civilizations believed it was impossible to defeat them. Their name was spoken with fear in every corner of the galaxy. The Dominion's power came from a mix of ruthless discipline, advanced technology, and a cold, emotionless understanding of war. Their leaders did not fight for honor or justice. They fought because conquest was their way of life. Each new planet they claimed became another stone added to the foundation of their empire. Their soldiers were trained from childhood, their minds shaped to believe that the Dominion was perfect and unstoppable. They were taught that there was no enemy too strong and no world too far. If something existed, it could be conquered. Their military strength was unmatched. The Dominion fleet stretched across light years, filled with ships so large they created shadows on entire moons as they passed. Some ships carried enough firepower to destroy a city with a single shot. Others were built for overwhelming ground invasions, releasing thousands of armored troops in minutes. Every part of their war machine worked like a single, well-oiled engine. If one ship fell, 10 more took its place. If a planet resisted, the Dominion crushed it quickly and moved on. One reason for their endless victories was their technology. The Dominion had discovered faster-than-light travel long before most species even left their home planets. Their weapons used exotic energy sources that other scientists could barely understand. Their armor could survive temperatures hotter than a star's surface. Even their smallest drones carried enough intelligence to outsmart enemy commanders. When the Dominion entered a battle, they already knew the outcome. Their enemies were simply too slow, too weak, or too disorganized to resist. But power alone was not what made the Dominion undefeated. It was their mindset. The Dominion believed deeply in efficiency and logic. They did not waste resources on emotions, celebrations, or mercy. They analyzed their enemies carefully. They studied their culture, their weaknesses, and their fears. Then they attacked exactly when resistance was lowest. They did not give warnings or speeches. They simply appeared, destroyed defenses, and claimed the world. History books written by conquered civilizations all described the same feeling. The Dominion came like a storm you could not escape. As their empire expanded, many species attempted alliances to fight back. Some formed secret resistance groups. Others built new weapons or hired mercenaries. But nothing ever worked. Every rebellion was crushed. Every new weapon was countered. Every plan the galaxy made fell apart as soon as the Dominion arrived. Soon, the galaxy stopped trying to resist. Surrender became the common choice, because surrender at least meant survival. In the Dominion's capital world, a massive planet-sized station called Zirath Prime, the High Council governed with steel determination. The council members were old, incredibly intelligent, and completely unshakable. They believed the Dominion's destiny was to rule the entire galaxy and maybe even beyond. Their arrogance was legendary. Whenever scouts reported a new species somewhere in the darkness of space, the council never asked, "Can we defeat them?" Instead, they asked, "How long will it take to conquer them?" The Dominion kept records, listing every world they had taken. The list grew longer every year. It began with small planets, then advanced ones, then mighty civilizations that had once been considered impossible to defeat. But the Dominion conquered them all. Some fought for weeks, others for minutes. No enemy had ever managed to destroy even a single Dominion war fleet. They were so confident that many commanders stopped wearing full armor. They felt no danger. The Dominion's reputation protected them more than any metal shield. Because they had never faced a true defeat, the Dominion developed a dangerous belief. They thought no species could ever surprise them. To them, all civilizations followed predictable patterns. Primitive species were weak. Advanced species were too cautious. Warriors were too emotional. Scientists were too slow. Diplomats talked too much. The Dominion believed they had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, and that nothing new could challenge them. This arrogance shaped the lives of every Dominion citizen. Children grew up hearing stories about how easily their ancestors had defeated other species. Soldiers trained with simulations that always ended in victory. Politicians promised citizens a future where the Dominion ruled all known space. There was no room for doubt, no room for humility. No one in the Dominion imagined that a tiny, unknown species could change everything. Their latest victories made them even more confident. In recent years, they had conquered 3 highly advanced planets without losing a single ship. Their admirals celebrated the efficiency of their strategies, and their scientists boasted that Dominion technology was now centuries ahead of everyone else. The galaxy seemed like a vast treasure waiting to be taken, and the Dominion marched forward without hesitation. But hidden beneath their pride was a single weakness. They underestimated everyone. They believed no species could ever match their intelligence, creativity, or drive. And so, when whispers began spreading about a new species living in a quiet corner of the galaxy, the Dominion paid little attention. Reports described them as adaptable, unpredictable, and surprisingly resilient. Scouts mentioned that these beings, humans, had survived disasters that should have destroyed them. But the Dominion ignored these details. To them, humans were just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. The Dominion did not know that this new species was different. They did not know that humans had a history of facing impossible challenges and finding a way to overcome them. The Dominion did not know that humanity had been watching, studying, and preparing. The Dominion believed they were marching toward another easy victory. They could not imagine that this time they were about to meet an enemy unlike any they had faced before. This was the beginning of the end of their perfect, undefeated record.
For many years, the Dominion believed they already knew every important species in the galaxy. They thought their maps were complete, their knowledge perfect, and their future unstoppable. But small whispers began to drift into their information networks. Tiny pieces of data mixed with trade signals, intercepted transmissions, and half-broken messages from faraway explorers. These whispers spoke of a new species living on the far edge of the galaxy, a place the Dominion had barely bothered to study. At first, no one took the rumor seriously. The galaxy was huge, and strange stories always appeared. But this time, the whispers did not fade. More and more scouts reported the same thing. There was a species out there that the Dominion had never encountered before. The first reports described them as unusual, almost unbelievable. They were called humans. They lived on a small blue and green planet, far from the central trade routes, in a system most Dominion maps listed as irrelevant. Dominion officials laughed, wondering how such a tiny, distant species managed to catch anyone's attention. But the scouts bringing these reports insisted that humans were different. They did not evolve like most species. Their history was filled with disasters and challenges that should have destroyed them, yet they survived every time. It was said that humans rebuilt their civilization again and again, each time stronger than before. When Dominion analysts reviewed the early data, they expected to find proof of weakness. They expected to confirm humans were primitive and harmless. Instead, the data was confusing. Human development did not follow normal patterns. Most species reached a point of comfort and stayed stable for centuries. Humans did not. They kept pushing boundaries, experimenting with ideas, building new machines, and exploring dangerous places even when it put them at risk. The analysts could not understand why humans acted this way. They wondered if the reports were exaggerated or mistaken. More scouts visited the region and returned with even stranger stories. They said humans were emotionally unpredictable. One moment they were peaceful and friendly, the next moment fiercely protective and unstoppable in battle. They said humans were adaptable, able to survive in deserts, freezing moons, underwater colonies, and orbiting stations. They said humans learned quickly, copied technology even faster, and solved problems in ways no Dominion scientist would have ever imagined. These descriptions made Dominion commanders uneasy, though they tried not to show it. The High Council began to take interest. They gathered all the reports and held long meetings to understand this new species. The council members did not fear the humans, but they were curious. For a long time, the Dominion had not encountered anything truly unexpected. Most species behaved exactly as predicted. But these humans, these strange, stubborn beings, did not fit into any of the Dominion's models. The Council finally ordered a deeper investigation. A group of spy satellites was sent near human space. They recorded surprising things. Humans fought wars with each other, but also united when danger threatened them. They built machines that seemed simple, but worked reliably in almost any condition. They explored their own solar system with great enthusiasm, sending ships to moons and planets despite having far weaker technology than the Dominion. Their progress speed was shocking. In only a few centuries, humans had moved from basic flight to building space stations and then to creating powerful engines. Dominion scientists who studied this growth rate felt something they had never felt before. Curiosity mixed with a tiny spark of worry. Then came the most shocking report. A scout ship had quietly observed humans dealing with a large asteroid that was about to hit one of their colonies. Instead of evacuating or giving up, humans worked together with incredible determination. They used dozens of small ships, gravity tools, nuclear engines, and raw bravery to push the asteroid off course. The mission should have failed. Many of their calculations were risky, but somehow everything worked. They saved the colony. Dominion observers could not believe it. No other species would attempt such a desperate plan, and no other species would succeed. These stories spread quickly among Dominion officers and crew members. Soldiers whispered about humans in their barracks. Commanders discussed them in private meetings. Some believed humans were an interesting challenge. Others thought they were just reckless fools who survived by luck. But a few, only a few, felt uneasy. They sensed that humans had something powerful inside them, something not seen in the rest of the galaxy. Still, the Dominion's arrogance was strong. Even though the reports described humans as tough and unpredictable, the High Council did not consider them a real threat. They believed humans were simply an amusing curiosity, one more species that needed to be taught obedience. When the Dominion decided to send a fleet toward human space, it was not because they felt danger. It was because they felt insulted. The idea that a small, unknown species could grow strong without the Dominion's permission irritated them. They wanted to examine humans closely, study their weaknesses, and decide the most efficient way to take control. As the fleet prepared to move, more last-minute information arrived. One scout reported that humans seemed unusually interested in exploring distant stars. Another reported that humans were experimenting with dangerous energy fields that even Dominion scientists considered risky. Yet another report stated that humans had made surprising progress in communication technologies. These pieces of information confused the Council because it did not match the behavior of a primitive species. But instead of slowing down or becoming cautious, the Dominion became even more confident. They thought humans were simply acting out of desperation, trying to grow quickly before being conquered. They believed humans were unpredictable only because they lacked discipline. They thought human creativity was only a sign of panic, not strength. And so they ignored all the warnings. The rumors were growing louder. The galaxy was changing quietly in the darkness. Humans were preparing for something. They had seen the Dominion. They had studied them from afar. They were not afraid. But the Dominion did not know this. They only knew that a new species existed, and they believed that species would soon kneel before them. They had no idea that these simple whispers were the beginning of their biggest mistake.
The decision to move toward human space spread through the Dominion like a spark running across dry grass. The High Council did not hesitate. As soon as they officially approved the mission, the Dominion's war machine awakened. Messages flew through the communication network. Admirals received orders. Officers rushed to their stations. Giant docking bays opened across dozens of worlds. It was time to assemble one of the largest fleets the galaxy had ever seen. On Xyrath Prime, the Dominion's capital, the main spaceport looked like a shining metal forest. Towering warships stood lined up in perfect rows, each one taller than a mountain. Engineers raced across walkways, tightening bolts, running power checks, and loading ammunition. Thousands of workers moved like a single living organism, knowing exactly what to do without needing to speak. The Dominion prided itself on this kind of efficiency. Every person had a role. Every second mattered. The first ship to launch was the Varkol Rex, a massive flagship shaped like a blade of silver metal. Its engines glowed with a cold blue light that could be seen from orbit. Inside, Admiral Thalcor inspected his crew. His face was stern, unreadable, and absolutely confident. He had led hundreds of successful invasions. To him, this mission was just another step in the Dominion's endless expansion. He had heard the rumors about humans, but he dismissed them as exaggerations. He believed humans were simply lucky survivors, nothing more. Across the galaxy, other fleets were gathering as well. On the industrial world of Kirsch 9, dozens of heavy destroyers launched one by one, their hulls covered in thick armor capable of resisting asteroids. On the icy moon of Varel, stealth ships uncloaked from their hiding places, ready to slip into human space unnoticed. Even the massive troop carriers, which looked like floating cities, began to fill with soldiers, robots, supplies, and walking mechs designed for ground combat. As each ship rose into orbit, it joined a larger formation. Smaller fleets merged into larger ones. Battle groups aligned into attack waves. Soon the sky above their staging worlds was full of ships, sometimes blocking sunlight from reaching the ground. Civilians stared upward with awe, knowing they were witnessing another great moment in Dominion history. But among the soldiers and junior officers inside these ships, conversations began to form. Many were excited, talking loudly about conquering a new world. Some bragged about how easy the mission would be. Others joked about humans, imagining them as panicked primitives who still used stone tools. Yet a few officers remained quiet. They remembered the strange reports from scouts. They wondered why the High Council was sending such a massive fleet for a species supposedly weak. They felt something unusual about this mission, though they kept their doubts hidden. Meanwhile, the Intelligence Division continued sending final updates to the fleet commanders. Most of the information was incomplete or outdated. Humans had been difficult to study closely. Their technology was always changing. Their behavior was unpredictable. The Dominion analysts struggled to create accurate models. But in the end, The High Council decided it didn't matter. If they could conquer star empires with advanced armies, surely this new species would fall quickly. When the last ships finished loading supplies, the fleet finally began to move. The launch sequence echoed across the galaxy like a distant thunderstorm. First, small ships jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind streaks of white light. Then medium ships followed, forming long, shining trails. Finally, the heavy warships activated their giant engines, shaking the air and ground beneath them, and disappeared into the darkness of space. Inside the flagship, Admiral Thalcor watched as the stars stretched into long, glowing lines during the hyperspace jump. He felt a strange, quiet excitement. Conquering new species always gave him pride. He believed this mission would strengthen his reputation even more. A simple, clean victory, nothing complicated. He imagined the High Council praising him, adding another medal to his already heavy uniform. On other ships, soldiers prepared for different roles. Some checked their weapons nervously. Others practiced quick simulations that always ended in Dominion victory. Troop commanders reviewed maps of human space, although they had very little data. Engineers double-checked energy levels. Medical officers sorted through emergency kits. Even though the Dominion believed the mission would be easy, they still followed procedures perfectly. Their discipline was absolute. During the long journey through hyperspace, the fleet maintained constant communication. A vast network linked every ship. Orders flowed smoothly. Status reports showed everything was functioning perfectly. But hidden inside all this order was a tiny, growing sense of uncertainty. The Dominion fleet had never traveled this far into the galaxy's outer arm. The unknown always made even seasoned soldiers uneasy, though they would never admit it. One night cycle, as the fleet traveled through a quiet region of hyperspace, something unusual happened. One of the smaller scout ships detected a strange energy signal. It was faint, but it resembled human technology. The scout captain immediately sent the data to the flagship. The information reached Thalcor, who studied it briefly, then dismissed it. He believed it was just a leftover signal from human satellites. But he did not know that humans had purposely left certain signals behind, signals designed to confuse Dominion scanners. As the fleet drew closer to human territory, the calm atmosphere slowly changed. The officers' conversations grew quieter. The ship corridors felt colder. Even the engines seemed to hum with a deeper tone. Many soldiers felt like they were walking into something important, something that would not be as simple as the Dominion expected. Still, the fleet pushed forward. The command officers made final preparations. Stealth ships moved ahead to scout. Communication lines tightened. Weapons were fully charged. And when the Dominion fleet finally exited hyperspace at the edge of human space, every soldier stood at attention, ready for another effortless victory. They expected a defensive wall of ships. They expected orbital cannons, heavy stations, or at least a visible military presence. But instead, they found something that confused everyone. A single, small, human ship, drifting quietly, motionless, alone. The Dominion didn't realize it yet, but this simple sight was the first crack in their unbroken record. The fleet had assembled with overwhelming confidence, but the greatest surprise of their existence was waiting for them, hidden in the silence of that tiny human ship. When the Dominion fleet came out of hyperspace, they expected something grand, something worthy of their size. They imagined rows of human warships waiting to defend their planet. They imagined huge defense towers pointing at them. They imagined panicked messages from human leaders begging for mercy. Instead, when the bright blue distortion of hyperspace faded away, the Dominion officers stared at something completely unexpected. Floating peacefully in the empty dark was a single human ship, small, quiet, unmoving. The moment this tiny ship appeared on their screens, confusion spread through the Dominion fleet. It didn't match anything in their predictions. Their models suggested humans would panic and prepare defenses. But here was one little ship, alone in the darkness, almost like it was asleep. Some Dominion officers laughed. They thought humans were mocking them. Others thought it was a trap. But no matter what theory they had, no one understood why a single fragile ship dared to face an entire armada. Admiral Thalkor stared at the viewscreen for a long moment. He was a logical man. He didn't believe in luck or fear. But this sight bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. Still, he kept a calm face. He ordered his officers to scan the human ship. Instantly, thousands of sensors activated. The Dominion's advanced machines began focusing on the ship's surface, looking for weapons, analyzing its structure, tracking its energy signatures. But the results only added more confusion. The ship was strangely modified. Its energy levels were unusually stable, and it wasn't broadcasting any warning signals, distress calls, or threats. The silence felt heavier than the open space around them. Inside the Dominion fleet, soldiers whispered among themselves. They wondered if humans had abandoned the ship, or maybe it was a bluff. Some younger soldiers grew impatient. They wanted action. They wanted to strike first and prove the Dominion's strength. But the higher officers knew better than to attack immediately. The Dominion always preferred understanding their enemy before destroying them. War was not personal to them. It was a mathematical operation. Finally, the Dominion opened a communication channel toward the human ship. They expected a weak, shaky voice to respond, someone afraid, someone desperate. But the channel remained silent. Seconds passed, then minutes. Still no answer. The tension grew stronger. It felt like the human ship wasn't ignoring them, but waiting for something. Admiral Thalkor grew irritated. He ordered a second communication attempt, this time with a warning. A deep, commanding voice echoed through the channel, stating that the Dominion demanded identification. Even then, the human ship did not respond. It remained quiet, drifting gently as if asleep. Many Dominion officers began to feel insulted. They believed humans were disrespecting them. But there was something else happening beneath the anger, something the Dominion rarely felt. Unease. The silence was too perfect, too controlled, too calm. To break this uncertainty, Thalkor ordered a few smaller Dominion ships to move closer. These scout ships glided through space like black arrows, approaching the human vessel carefully. They scanned every angle, expecting to find hidden weapons or traps. But there was nothing. The ship was unarmed, at least it appeared that way. That only confused them more. Why would humans send an unarmed ship to face thousands of Dominion warships? Meanwhile, on the Dominion flagship, officers were busy analyzing every detail. One officer suggested humans might be trying psychological warfare. Another said it was likely an old ship left behind by accident. A third wondered if humans were simply too foolish to understand the importance of first contact. Thalkor listened patiently to all theories, but none satisfied him. Everything about this situation felt wrong. To calm the growing tension, he finally ordered the fleet to prepare weapons, not to fire, just to aim. It was a common intimidation tactic. When thousands of Dominion ships locked onto a target, it usually caused enemies to surrender instantly. Their targeting arrays shined with deadly precision. Millions of weapon systems focused on the small human craft. And that is when something strange happened. The human ship powered up, not fully, but just a flicker of internal light. It was subtle, but enough to catch everyone's attention. Dominion sensors picked up a faint ripple in the surrounding space. It wasn't a weapons signature. It wasn't a communication signal. It was something else. something new. The scientists on board the fleet couldn't identify the signal. Their machines tried to classify the signal but failed. That had never happened before. Dominion technology was supposed to understand everything. The officers held their breath, waiting for the human ship to speak. But once again, nothing happened. No messages, no warnings, just that soft flicker. The tension inside the Dominion fleet grew so thick, it felt like the air itself was squeezing their chests. Every soldier, every officer, every commander felt it. They were watching something they didn't understand, and the Dominion hated what it couldn't understand. Admiral Thalkor, for the first time in years, felt unsure. He had led battles against empires far more advanced than humans. He had commanded fleets twice this size. He had faced weapons that could break planets, but never had he felt such confusion from something so small and quiet. Still, he kept a calm face. He ordered his officers to disable the target, not destroy, just disable. The Dominion always preferred capturing enemy ships to study them. The officers activated the targeting command. Weapons locked, engines aligned, energy cores began to charge. And then, just as the final sequence reached its final step, the Dominion fleet experienced something they had never felt before in their long, undefeated history. Everything stopped. Not slowly, not with warning, instantly. The engines froze, the targeting systems froze, the lights flickered, the communications fell silent. The entire fleet, from the smallest scout ship to the giant flagship, became motionless, paralyzed in space. And all they could see, directly ahead of them, was that single, quiet, human ship, still drifting, still silent, but suddenly terrifying in its simplicity. The Dominion had come to expect fear, chaos, and easy victory. Instead, they found a silence so controlled and powerful that it felt like the universe itself had held its breath. And deep inside, every Dominion officer realized something terrifying. Humans were not what they expected, not at all.
The Dominion fleet had prepared itself for battle. Weapons were charged, engines were tense with energy. Every ship stood ready to strike the lone human vessel drifting ahead of them. The Dominion officers believed they were moments away from an easy victory. But then, in the space of a heartbeat, everything changed. The first sign of trouble was so small that most officers didn't even notice it. A tiny flicker on their screens, a brief delay in the targeting system, a tenth of a second of lag. It felt like nothing at all, but Dominion systems never lagged. Their machines were perfect, fast, precise, and always reliable. That small flicker was the beginning of something far worse. Within seconds, the flicker became a wave. Lights dimmed inside the flagship, then brightened again, like the ship was breathing unevenly. The crew exchanged confused looks. Someone reported that the internal sensors were resetting on their own. Someone else said the engine readings looked unstable. The admiral frowned, trying to understand what was happening. Then everything stopped. Every system, every engine, every weapon, every screen. The entire Dominion armada froze in a single instant, like time had suddenly turned to stone. Inside the flagship, alarms tried to activate but failed. The sound systems were frozen too. The lights were stuck at half brightness, giving the entire command room a cold, ghostly glow. Officers pressed buttons, but nothing responded. Screens stayed frozen on the last frame before the shutdown. It felt like the entire fleet had been swallowed by a silent, invisible force. No one could move their ship, no one could fire, no one could escape. The Dominion fleet, known across the galaxy as unstoppable, now hung motionless in space like statues.
Admiral Thalkor felt a wave of shock ripple through his normally calm mind. He tried issuing commands, but his voice echoed only in the silent room. The communication channels were dead. He pressed the emergency override controls, but they didn't respond. It was as if the ship itself had been trapped in a block of frozen time. The admiral demanded a report from his officers. Slowly, they realized something horrifying. It wasn't just the flagship. Every Dominion ship was frozen. Every engine, every weapon, every sensor, every life support control, all of them were locked at the same time. Some officers tried to manually reactivate the engines. They opened control panels, pulled wires, used backup systems, but nothing worked. Even the mechanical parts, which should have been independent from software, refused to move, like they were held in place by invisible hands. In one of the smaller destroyers, a young engineer panicked. He had never experienced a total system failure before. He grabbed a wrench and tried to open a maintenance hatch by force. The wrench slipped from his hand. It didn't fall. It floated in the air, unmoving, frozen just like everything else. The engineer stared at it with wide eyes, unable to understand how this was happening. Across the fleet, soldiers felt fear rising in their chests. Dominion troops were trained to remain calm in battle, but this wasn't battle. This was something beyond their knowledge. They had faced weapons that exploded planets, plasma storms, and collapsing stars, but never had they faced a force that simply froze everything without noise, without warning, without damage. And worst of all, the human ship, the small, silent ship that seemed so weak, remained perfectly untouched. It floated peacefully in front of the frozen Dominion armada, like a tiny bird resting calmly before 1,000 giant predators that suddenly could not move. Admiral Thalkor watched the ship carefully. He noticed a faint glow around it, a soft, gentle pulse of light that spread outward like ripples in water. It wasn't bright, it wasn't threatening, but something about it felt deeply powerful, like watching a star being born inside a dark room. The admiral realized with growing horror that the human ship was the cause of everything. A single small human vessel had stopped one of the largest, most advanced war fleets in the galaxy without firing a shot, without releasing a weapon, without even touching them. The Dominion had always believed power came from size, firepower, and technology, but now, staring at that silent ship, Thalkor understood that humans had found a different kind of power, one the Dominion did not understand. Attempts to send messages failed. The communication systems were locked. The officers tried to activate even the simplest emergency program, but nothing responded. The fleet was trapped, helpless, like insects in amber. Minutes passed. Silent, heavy, endless minutes. Then something even stranger happened. The human ship moved. Not fast, not aggressively. Just a small, gentle drift forward, like it was waking up from a long sleep. That small movement sent waves of panic through the Dominion fleet. Even though they knew the ship could not physically harm them, the fact that it could move and they could not made the power difference painfully clear. Inside the flagship, one officer whispered, barely able to breathe, "We are powerless." Another officer, older and wiser, stared at the human vessel with trembling hands. "This is not a weapon. This is something beyond a weapon." Admiral Thalkor felt shame burning inside him. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be completely defeated, not in battle, but in spirit. Even if the Dominion somehow escaped this situation, their image of invincibility was shattered. Still, he kept his eyes on the human ship. He waited for destruction. He waited for a final attack. But no attack came. The human ship simply hovered there, glowing softly, calm, controlled, almost compassionate. The admiral realized something unexpected. Humans weren't here to destroy them. They were here to show something. A message hidden in silence. We see you. We understand you. And we can stop you whenever we want. The Dominion fleet remained frozen, helpless and humbled, while the lone human ship drifted forward with gentle confidence. It was not the Dominion who was in control.
The Dominion fleet hung in space like a giant sculpture, frozen in perfect silence. Thousands of warships, each one powerful enough to destroy cities, were now unable to move even a single inch. Engines, weapons, shields, communication, everything had been locked in the same moment. No one in the Dominion had ever seen anything like this. They had faced powerful enemies before, but none had managed to stop an entire armada without firing a single shot. Inside the flagship, Admiral Thalkor still stared at the small human ship. It drifted gently in front of them, glowing with that strange, soft light. Every officer on the bridge kept watching it, barely breathing, waiting for what would happen next. For the first time in their long military careers, they felt helpless. Then, suddenly, the human ship sent a signal. It wasn't a weapon or an attack. It was a communication ping, simple, clean, and calm. Dominion translators, even though half frozen, barely managed to process it. Then a voice came through the speakers. Clear, controlled, human. Dominion fleet, please remain calm. You are safe. Safe, the word echoed through the silent fleet. None of the Dominion officers felt safe. They felt trapped, confused, overwhelmed. But the human voice sounded so peaceful, as if talking to frightened children, not to a massive war machine known for destroying worlds. The voice continued. Your systems have been temporarily disabled to prevent unnecessary conflict. We mean you no harm. No harm. Admiral Thalkor clenched his jaw. He didn't understand. Why would a species with such power choose not to attack? If humans had the ability to freeze an entire armada, they could easily destroy it. Yet they didn't. The Dominion had never met a species that chose restraint when it held absolute power. While the voice spoke, the glow around the human ship pulsed again. The frozen wrench in the destroyer, the locked engine panels, even the stuck doors in the troop carrier, all of them vibrated gently, showing that the freeze wasn't simple jamming or hacking. It was something deeper, something that touched the laws of physics themselves. The voice said, "You attempted to aim your weapons. This triggered our quantum interference field. It is designed to prevent conflict without causing damage." Quantum interference field. The word sent shockwaves through the Dominion officers. That kind of technology wasn't supposed to exist. Dominion scientists had tried for centuries to create something similar, but failed. They believed such a device was impossible, a violation of nature itself. But humans had built it, quietly, without bragging, without warning anyone. The entire Dominion fleet had been stopped by a field they once thought belonged only in theoretical papers. Admiral Thalkor finally regained his voice. He shouted at the communication screen, hoping somehow the humans could hear him. "Who are you? How did you create this technology? Why are you doing this?" There was a short pause. Then the human captain answered. "We are explorers, survivors, learners. We created this field to defend ourselves without causing death. We knew you were coming." The Dominion officers felt their hearts tighten. Humans had expected them. Humans had prepared. Humans understood the Dominion better than the Dominion understood them. The voice continued, "We have studied your history. We know you conquer out of logic, not cruelty. You believe strength creates order, but your strength is no longer enough." Those words struck Thalkor like a physical blow. Never in his life had anyone spoken to him that way. For centuries, the Dominion believed they were the strongest force in the galaxy. But now, a single human ship was explaining, calmly, almost gently, that their era of dominance was over. Inside the other ships, soldiers listened too. Their fear slowly mixed with something else: confusion, respect, a strange sense of awe. They had expected humans to be primitive, chaotic, weak, but now the truth stood right in front of them. Humans were something entirely different. The voice spoke again, softer now. "We do not wish to destroy you. We prefer to talk, to share knowledge, to find peace, but we cannot allow you to continue conquering innocent worlds." The Dominion officers exchanged shocked looks. No species had ever dared to lecture the Dominion. No species had ever stopped them without fear. No species had ever offered peace instead of surrender. Admiral Thalkor took a deep breath. He knew he had to respond. "If you wished to destroy us, you could have already." "Yes, but destruction is easy. Understanding is harder. Cooperation is harder. And humans always choose the harder path when it leads to a better future." For a moment, no one in the Dominion fleet could speak. The human captain continued explaining the technology, not in complex scientific words, but in simple terms the Dominion officers could understand. The field they used wasn't a hack. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a weapon. It was a new kind of science, something built on unpredictable creativity, something humans were very good at. They had found a way to interfere with quantum flow, slowing down certain physical processes without damaging anything. Engines, weapons, and systems simply became unable to function as if they were caught in a soft, gentle bubble of stillness. The most shocking part was this: the field had several settings. The humans were currently using the lowest level. If they wanted, they could have locked the entire Dominion fleet permanently. If they wanted, they could have shut down the reactors and left the ships drifting forever. But they didn't. Instead, they chose the lowest, safest option: a warning, a demonstration, a signal that humanity did not want war, but was fully capable of winning one. Admiral Thalkor felt the weight of this realization. Humans had achieved what no empire, no planet, no species had ever done. They had defeated the Dominion without firing, without killing, without damaging anything. The human captain's voice softened one last time. "We will now restore partial control to your ships, enough to communicate, enough to breathe, but not enough to fight. Please do not attempt to resist. We want to talk." And then, gently, almost kindly, the Dominion fleet began to thaw. Screens flickered back to life, lights brightened, air systems restarted, but weapons remained locked. Engines stayed frozen. The Dominion had always seen themselves as the masters of the galaxy. Now they were students, sitting quietly before a teacher they never expected. The humans.
When the human captain finished speaking, the Dominion fleet remained silent. Not because their systems were frozen, but because every officer, every soldier, every commander was trapped in shock. They had just heard something impossible. A single human ship had stopped one of the strongest forces in the galaxy. And instead of using this power to destroy them, humans were calmly asking for peace. For the Dominion, this was more frightening than any weapon. Inside the flagship, Admiral Falkor struggled to keep his thoughts steady. His entire life had been built on a simple belief: the Dominion was unbeatable. He had grown up learning that every other species was weaker, slower, less intelligent. He had been told since childhood that the Dominion would rule the galaxy forever. Every school, every training center, every military lesson repeated the same idea: we are superior. No one can challenge us. But now, that belief had been cracked open like thin glass. Falkor watched the small human ship floating in the distance. It looked harmless, peaceful, almost friendly. Yet its silence carried more weight than the loudest battle cry. The Admiral realized the truth. Humans had shown mercy only because they chose to, not because they needed to. The Dominion was no longer the strongest. The moment this truth entered his mind, it spread through him like cold fire. He felt it burn through every memory of his victories, every medal he had earned, every speech he had given. All his pride, all his confidence, all his certainty. Everything felt smaller now, fragile, shaken. Across the fleet, the same feeling grew inside every Dominion officer. Arrogance, the very core of their empire, began to crumble. In one destroyer, a young soldier stared at his frozen control panel. He whispered, "All my life, they told us we were invincible." His voice trembled. His commander, an older officer, placed a hand on his shoulder. But even the commander's hand was shaking. "I believed it too," he admitted quietly, "but we were wrong." On another ship, a science officer sat in disbelief. She had spent years studying the physics of war. She understood weapons, shields, engines, everything. But she could not explain the human quantum field, not even a little. She whispered to herself, "How did they do it? We should have known. We should have seen the signs." But the Dominion's arrogance had blinded them. They never believed another species could surpass them. They never imagined anyone could reach a level of creativity they couldn't predict. Meanwhile, in the flagship's command room, Falkor finally spoke. He said quietly, "Our models were incorrect." The officers around him looked shocked. Dominion leaders never admitted mistakes. But Falkor continued, "We underestimated them. We misjudged their intelligence. We assumed they were weak. That assumption has cost us our dominance." A hush fell over the room. No one dared to respond. They all knew he was right. For centuries, the Dominion had used fear as their greatest weapon. They conquered worlds simply by arriving. Their reputation alone won battles before they even began. But now, for the first time, the Dominion itself was afraid. Not of death, not of destruction, but of something worse, the knowledge that they were no longer the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. Fear became a quiet shadow across the fleet. On a troop carrier, soldiers huddled together, speaking in low voices. "If humans can stop our fleets, what else can they do?" one soldier whispered. Maybe they're beyond us. Maybe they see things we can't." This idea scared them more than any weapon could. Even the High Council, monitoring from far away, felt the first cracks of panic. They had sent the fleet expecting a quick victory. Now their mighty armada was trapped by a single ship. The council members stared at their screens, horrified. They had not planned for this. They had not even considered it possible. Suddenly, the council chambers felt smaller, darker, and strangely claustrophobic. But as the Dominion collapsed into fear and confusion, something else began to grow, something unfamiliar to them. Respect. Not the forced respect they demanded from conquered worlds, but genuine respect for humans. Because humans had done something the Dominion never could: create power without cruelty, strength without destruction, control without domination. Humans had offered peace even when they held all the advantages. This shocked the Dominion more deeply than the freezing technology itself. Why would the stronger side choose kindness? Why would the superior species choose to talk instead of conquer? Admiral Thalkor sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. He thought back to all the civilizations the Dominion had crushed. How many of them wanted to negotiate? How many had offered cooperation? How many chances at peace had the Dominion thrown away because they believed they were too powerful to care? Now, they were the ones facing a choice. They could cling to their pride and resist, risking complete destruction. Or they could accept the truth and listen to humanity, maybe for the first time learning something new. Thalkor closed his eyes. He realized that the Dominion had gone so far down the path of arrogance that they had forgotten how to adapt. Humans, on the other hand, adapted constantly. They grew stronger through challenges. They learned from failure. They pushed boundaries, and they never gave up, even when weaker. That was the secret the Dominion had missed. Humans were not powerful because of their ships or weapons. Humans were powerful because of their spirit, a spirit that refused to accept limits, a spirit that evolved faster than any empire, a spirit that could look at a galaxy full of danger and say, "We will survive." Thalkor opened his eyes and took a slow breath. The walls of arrogance that once stood inside him had finally fallen. For the first time in his life, he understood something important. The Dominion had ruled through fear. Humans would rule through possibility, and that made them far more dangerous. In that moment, Thalkor knew the truth. The age of the Dominion was ending, and the age of humanity was beginning.
The Dominion fleet slowly came back online, but only partially. Engines hummed weakly, weapons stayed locked, and movement was limited. It felt like waking up after being frozen in ice. Every ship breathed again, but none were strong enough to fight. The human ship floated in front of them, glowing softly, as if watching with calm eyes. It didn't move closer or farther. It simply waited. Inside the Dominion flagship, Admiral Thalkor sat in silence, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His officers stood frozen, not physically this time, but mentally. The idea that another species had total control over them was something they could not fully understand. Their entire world had changed in a single encounter. The communication screen flickered to life, and once again the calm human voice returned. Dominion Fleet, control has been partially restored. You may communicate, you may breathe, you may think, but please do not attempt aggression. We want to talk. Talk. The word felt strange to the Dominion. They were used to giving orders, not receiving requests for discussion. They were used to demanding surrender, not being asked politely to listen. Admiral Thalkor took a deep breath and answered, We understand. You wish to negotiate?" "Yes," the human captain replied gently. "We prefer cooperation over war. It is time for a new path. A new path. The phrase made the Dominion officers exchange nervous glances. For centuries, they had believed there was only one path: conquest, strength, expansion. But humans were offering something far different, something the Dominion had never experienced before: equality. The human voice continued. We know your history. We know your purpose. You sought order through domination. But domination is not the only way. Together, we can build something better. Thalcor leaned forward. He felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Why would you offer peace, he asked slowly, when you clearly have the power to destroy us? There was a brief pause before the human captain answered. Because destruction is not victory. True victory is when both sides walk away stronger. True victory is when knowledge is shared, not stolen. We choose peace because it creates a future worth living in. Those words struck the Dominion officers deeply. No species had ever spoken to them like this. Every other civilization had begged for survival or cursed them with hatred. But humans were different. They didn't show fear or rage. They showed compassion, even toward their enemies. The human captain continued. Your fleet came to conquer us, but instead of punishing you, we invite you to talk. We invite you to understand. We invite you to change. The admiral felt his heart tighten. Change was something the Dominion rarely accepted, but after today, he knew they had no choice. Their old way of living had been shattered. Their pride, their arrogance, their unbreakable belief in dominance, all of it had collapsed when their fleet froze in the void of space. Thalcor closed his eyes for a moment, then spoke. What do you propose? First, the human captain said, you will return home safely. Your fleet will be released from the quantum field once we finish discussions. Second, we will open communication between our governments. Third, we will share limited information about our technology, but only for peaceful use. The Dominion officers gasped softly. Sharing technology. That was something the Dominion never did. And now humans were offering it freely, without fear of being abused. The idea felt unbelievable. Thalcor asked, and what do you want from us in return? The answer came without hesitation. We want the Dominion to stop conquering innocent worlds. We want you to consider alliances instead of invasions. We want you to see the galaxy not as a battlefield, but as a place filled with diverse minds that can grow together. The Admiral felt something he had never felt before: hope mixed with shame. He realized humans weren't trying to force control. They were trying to open doors. They were giving the Dominion something they had never had: a second chance. A chance to become better. For a long moment, no one spoke. The quiet between the fleets felt huge and important. It wasn't the heavy silence from before. It was a peaceful one, filled with possibility. Finally, Admiral Thalcor nodded slowly. We accept your proposal, he said, voice trembling slightly. We will return home and discuss this new future. The human captain responded with warmth. Thank you, Admiral. This moment will be remembered by both our species. It is the beginning of something new. Slowly, gently, the quantum interference field began to fade. Engines hummed louder. Screens brightened. The Dominion ships regained control, full control this time. But none of them moved aggressively. None of them aimed weapons. The Dominion ships felt humbled, changed, almost reborn. For the first time in their long history, the Dominion pulled back without using force. As the fleet turned away from human space, the officers stared at the small human ship growing smaller behind them. It did not chase them. It did not threaten them. It simply watched, like a guardian making sure they were safe. Inside the flagship, Admiral Thalcor whispered quietly, "We were wrong about them." An officer beside him replied softly, "We were wrong about everything." When the Dominion fleet finally entered hyperspace, they carried with them more than a message. They carried a lesson, one that would transform their entire civilization. They had always believed strength came from domination, but humans showed them a new kind of strength. Strength that came from creativity. Strength that came from compassion. Strength that came from offering peace when war was easier. Back on Xyrath Prime, the High Council would soon learn the truth. The Dominion's greatest fleet had been stopped not by weapons, but by humans. And humanity, once unknown and underestimated, had just changed the future of the galaxy. The Dominion would no longer rule through fear. A new galactic order had begun, one led not by conquest, but by cooperation.